morning. Welcome. Oh, I haven't turned on the closed captioning. There we go. Good morning. Welcome to Chalice Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a community of diverse beliefs and experiences, nurturing the liberal religious spirit and united by our desire to grow in love and in service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your life's journey, you are welcome here. Whether you gather with us every Sunday, once or twice a year, or are with us this morning for the first time, we are glad you are here. I'm Reverend Sharon Wiley, Chalice's minister. Our worship musician this morning is our music director, Tim McKnight. Welcome to this online worship service. Welcome to those of you watching live using Zoom, and welcome to those of you who are watching the recording of this service later on Chalice's YouTube channel. For those of us using Zoom, please notice on your menu that you have a button that says CC Live Transcript. This is Zoom's closed captioning service, and you can click on it to hide the subtitle if you don't want to see it, or you can show the subtitle if you want that function on. So you're in control if that is on or off on your screen. Also on your menu is the chat button. For those of us who like to use the chat box during the service, which you're welcome to do, please be sure that when you post that you'll use that little blue menu there to select everyone. If you only chat with the host and panelists, I am all of the hosts and panelists, so that's me. I may not see your message during the service, and I may not realize that it came only to me. So let's all give ourselves a big hug of hello and welcome, and we use this to hug each other too. So if you have friends in the congregation, imagine hugging them this morning, sending our love and care to everyone. If you share space with someone, you might actually hug them if you both consent. And finally, I want to especially welcome those of you who are newcomers at Chalice this morning. Towards the end of the service, I'll put a link in the chat box for adding your name to our email list. Our weekly email is the best way to get information about our groups and activities, most of which are happening via Zoom right now. And if they're in-person activities, they probably went back on hold during Omicron. But as we look ahead to February, we'll start to think about, can we start meeting in person again together? So again, being on our email list is the best way to be informed about that. Now, let's take a breath together.
I'm Judy Cavallo.
I'm Steve Schlesinger.
And we live on land stolen from the Payam-Quishim, now known as San Marcos.
My name is Dennis Brown, and I live on land stolen from the Payam-Quishim, now known as Marietta.
My name is Dre Marsh, and I live on land stolen from the Kumeyaay and Payam-Quishim, now known as Escondido.
My name is Jeff Harlig. I live on land stolen from the Payam-Quishim. That area is now known as Vista.
I'm Debbie Street Idell. I live on land stolen from the Kumeyaay. It's now known as Scripps Ranch.
My name is Amaki Ayipa, and I live on land stolen from the Payam-Quishim, now known as San Marcos.
Now we light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Our chalice lighting words are from Reverend Beatrice Hitchcock. The flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. It is an everlasting flame for this community. It offers its warmth to those who are cold. It provides light to those who would see. It purifies and transforms this time into sacred time, this congregation into sacred community. May its flame burn true and high and strong.
Today is the 5th in our series of 10 spotlights on Black composers. Previous spotlights included Samuel Coleridge Taylor, Florence Price, Scott Joplin, and Nathaniel Dett. Today we spotlight Margaret Bonds, a Black American composer, pianist, arranger, and teacher who was born in 1913, making her our first featured composer born after 1900. Margaret Bonds showed an early aptitude for composition, writing her first work, Marquette Street Blues, at age 5. She began studying piano with her mother, and by the time she reached age 8, Margaret had progressed to studying at the Coleridge Taylor Music School. During high school, Margaret studied piano and composition with Florence Price. In 1929, at the young age of 16, Bonds began her studies at Northwestern University, where she was one of the few Black students at the time. The university's prejudicial policies meant that Margaret was not permitted to reside on campus, even though she was a student. Campus restaurants would not serve Margaret because she was Black. Despite the hostile, racist environment that she had to endure, Margaret thrived artistically during this time. In 1933, she not only earned her Bachelor of Music degree from Northwestern, but also performed as a soloist with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, the first Black person in history to do so. Just 1 year later, in 1934, Margaret earned her Master of Music degree from Northwestern, and she was the featured pianist for the Women's Symphony Orchestra of Chicago, performing the Piano Concerto in D minor, composed by her former teacher, Florence Price. All of these accomplishments, and just barely 21 years old. In 1936, Margaret met the prolific African-American poet and writer Langston Hughes. The two would become great friends and would embark on many artistic collaborations throughout their lives. For example, in December 1960, CBS televised The Ballad of the Brown King, a Christmas cantata composed by Margaret Bonds with words by Langston Hughes. Originally written for voice and piano, the work was expanded into a 9-movement cantata featuring a chorus, vocal soloists, and full orchestra. The work focuses on the African king Balthazar, one of the Magi from the biblical story of Jesus' birth. The 9 movements combine elements of various Black musical traditions, including jazz, gospel, blues, and spirituals. For more on the friendship and artistic collaborations of Bonds and Hughes, go to the Georgetown University Library website, where you can find an exhibition entitled Margaret Bonds and Langston Hughes, A Musical Friendship. Margaret Bonds was quite successful during her lifetime, in high demand as a composer and performer. Her impressively versatile compositional output includes orchestral works, theatrical scores, choral works, vocal solos, cantatas, piano solos, and traditional African-American spiritual arrangements. Bonds was educated as a classical musician, but her work was strongly influenced by jazz and blues. Her compositions were performed by a large number of eclectic artists, including Leontine Price, Louis Armstrong, Marian Anderson, and Woody Herman. In 1964, Bonds composed her Montgomery Variations for orchestra, a set of 7 programmatic variations on the spiritual I Want Jesus to Walk With Me. You'll hear one of these variations later in today's service. The work was inspired by the 1965 Civil Rights March from Selma to Montgomery, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to whom Margaret Bonds dedicated the work. Late in her life, Margaret moved to Los Angeles, teaching music at the Los Angeles Inner City Institute and Cultural Center. Zubin Mehta and the Los Angeles Philharmonic premiered her Credo for chorus and orchestra in 1972, just before her unexpected death at age 59. Margaret Bonds should be remembered as an important and influential composer of the 20th century. But it seemed until very recently that she had been largely forgotten. Louise Taupin, an opera singer and voice professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, notes that, quote, It's amazing that people don't know who she was, although she was quite well known in her time, unquote. There are many complex reasons for this, including the fact that much of Margaret Bonds' music, including the Montgomery variations, were thought to have been lost forever. In 2017, the Montgomery variations, as well as several other pieces by Bonds, were found next to a dumpster, waiting to be thrown out. Perhaps this discovery will help to rekindle an interest in Margaret Bonds' music. Indeed, our culture needs to be reacquainted with this great composer. I hope that today's spotlight will contribute, at least in a small way, toward that end.
The words of our call to worship come from the Reverend Maureen Killeran. Welcome, you who come in need of healing, you who are confused, or have been betrayed. Welcome with your problems and your pain. Welcome to your joys and your wonderings. Welcome your need to hope, your longing for assurance. Instead of answers, now may you find safety for your questions. Instead of promises, may you find community for your struggles, people with hearts and hands to join you in engaging the challenges and changes of our day. Let us worship together. You're invited to join in singing.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There will be freedom in that land. There will be freedom in that land. There will be freedom in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There will be freedom in that land. There will be freedom in that land. There will be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There will be justice in that land. There will be justice in that land. There will be justice in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There will be justice in that land. There will be justice in that land. There will be justice in that land where I'm bound. There will be singing in that land. There will be singing in that land. There will be singing in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There will be singing in that land. There will be singing in that land. There will be singing in that land where I'm bound.
Our Sunday worship is the shared spiritual practice of our community, and we tend to the congregation during this time by sharing and honoring our joys and sorrows. If you'd like to share a joy or sorrow with the congregation this morning, now is the time for sharing in the chat box. These aren't spoken out loud and they don't become part of our recording. If you'd like to send me a confidential note about your joy or sorrow, or to make a prayer request, please email me. I'll put my email address in the chat box.
Black is a rainbow color, written by Angela Joy and illustrated by Akua Holmes. Red is a rainbow color. Green sits next to blue. Yellow, orange, violet, indigo. They are rainbow colors too, but my color is black, and there's no black in rainbows. Black is a crayon tangled in a box. Black is a feather on white winter snow. Black is the dirt where sunflowers grow. My color is black. Black are the braids in my best friend's hair. Black are the bottoms of summertime feet. Black are soft circles that spin down the street. My color is black. Black is a rhythm. Black is the blues. Black is sidewalking in spit-shine shoes. Black is the robe on Thurgood's back. Black are the trains on railroad tracks. Black are the eyes on salted peas. Black are the shadows of old magnolia trees. Black is molasses from tall sugar cane. Black is soft singing, hush now, don't explain. Black is the skillet for bread to fry. Black are dreams and raisins left out in the sun to die. Black is the color of ink staining page. Black is the mask that shelters his rage. Black are the birds in cages that sing. Black is a color. Black is a culture. Black is history. Black is family. Black is memory. Black is community. Black is the love that lives inside of me. My color is black. Black are the stones bearing witness to prayer. Black is the faith in a freedom not seen. Black was the man who gave the world his dream. Black is a color. Black is a culture. Black is the heart of a candle and flame. Black is the power of a movement in pain. Black are the branches that carry my name, weaving, wrapping, lifting, laughing, hoping, grasping, quiet, strong. Our color is black. So you see, there is no black in rainbows, no black in green or blue, but in my box of crayons, black is a rainbow too.
Our story was narrated by Reverend Viola Abbott, who will preach for us coming up in June. Each year, I pick a topic for us to study deeply over the course of the church year called our Spirit Study topic. The main expression of our Spirit Study is a series of 10 sermons, one per month, beginning in September and going through June. So during the course of our anti-racism work over the past few years, we have heard again and again to center the voices and experiences of marginalized peoples, and for white people to do less talking and more listening. And so I started to think about how great it would be for us to listen to some of our Black UU preachers, especially now that using video has opened us up to being able to hear from people outside our local area. So I've invited 10 UU preachers to preach for us over the course of 10 months, one service a month, and they are invited to preach on any topic of their choosing. Today is the 5th sermon in this series. This morning's preacher is the Reverend Walter LeFlore. He is the developmental minister at the UU Church of Roanoke, Virginia. Before this, he served the UU Fellowship of Poughkeepsie, New York for 8 years. He served on numerous boards and committees, including the Board of Trustees of the UU Ministers Association. Ordained in 2011, he interned at All Souls Unitarian in Washington, D.C. And prior to ministry, he was principal of an organization development consultancy. It's our privilege to have him as our pulpit guest this morning.
Our reading this morning comes from one of our better known UU theologians, Paul Razor. It comes from a book by the name of Faith Without Certainty. He writes, "Many of us share the widespread concern about the dwindling sense of community in American life, and some are especially concerned with the role of religious community. We say we want stronger communities, yet we seem afraid to let go of the individualistic orientation that stands in the way. A shared belief in autonomous individualism is a poor foundation on which to build a deeper sense of community, religious or otherwise. The deep-seated individualism in our culture and in religious liberalism reflects a misguided and dangerously outmoded understanding of the human self. We cannot adequately satisfy our longing for community until we learn to embrace a different view of the self. The importance of balancing the needs of the individual and the community will always be there, but the balance we strike, indeed our attitude toward community itself, is affected by our self-understanding. We don't need simply to shift the balance between the individual and the community. We need to come to a different notion of what it means to be an individual. We will not make such progress toward reclaiming the community we seek unless we grasp this. The liberal, modern, individualistic understanding of the self, though still widely held in liberal religious circles, is no longer tenable. It's rooted in an outdated philosophical paradigm and is inconsistent with contemporary developments in the natural and social sciences. This idea is itself the product of a particular culture. In many ways, it is a historical anomaly. In other words, our liberal, modern understanding of ourselves as autonomous individuals is an illusion. The truth is that we don't first exist as individuals who then form social groups. The group always comes first. As individuals, our identities are always formed in relation to a particular social context. We are social beings through and through. I hope the title of my sermon today, "The Last Shall Be First and the First Last," might prompt you to think about one of the more memorable verses in the Bible, Matthew 20:16. I looked it up. The verse has universal meaning. This morning, I want to hold up the importance of universality, and more specifically, universalism. That's what I want to hold up this morning. The backstory of the verse is about a landowner who hired laborers to work in the vineyard. Since some were hired early in the day, others were hired at different times later in the day. At the end of the day, the landowner paid those who were hired last. He paid them first. They received the same amount of compensation as those who were hired earlier in the day. And not surprisingly, those who were hired first, those who had worked longer hours, they complained. They said, "Well, wait a minute. What's going on here? Those guys only worked a few hours, we worked all day, and yet you paid them the same as you paid us. The landowner explained that they were being paid a full day's wages. He said, what's the fuss? You're getting exactly what we agreed to when you were hired. You're not getting cheated out of anything. He told them that it was his money and that he had a right to be generous. Now, the following verses in Matthew do not tell us whether or not those words satisfied those laborers. I think this is a wonderful parable. I think it speaks to universalism. Universalism is a philosophical, it's a theological orientation that speaks to a fundamental truth, universal reconciliation. Theologically, it speaks to a belief that all can be saved and restored to right relationship with God. Now, I have no interest in a theological argument about the veracity of the claim. I simply want to hold up the concept because I believe it has a significant impact on how we live our lives, how we perceive and interact with others. It's the real life implication, the real life application that I think is important for us to contemplate. I believe it's the concept of universalism that gives our faith its power. And more importantly, and I do want to highlight this, the internalization of the belief in universalism that has the ability to impact how we live our lives. The concept of universalism plays too little a role in the lived experience of our culture today. It's a gift we who use can and should bring to the world around us. You see, that verse says it doesn't matter if you work all day. It doesn't matter if you pick more grapes than someone else. You are not worth more than another. You're not more worthy than another, even if you work longer hours than another. The last shall be first, and the first last can be seen as the backbone of a moral code of conduct. Such a belief, if operationalized, would make it impossible for one to perceive themselves as superior because of their situation or their station in life. It would get in the way of those with more money or more education than another to adopt a perspective of superiority over those with less. It would put to a lie the belief that one is superior because of one's beauty, one's body size, one's shape. It would make one sound silly if they made negative assumptions about individuals because they lived in the poor part of town, or because they had a particular skin color or sexual orientation. Beliefs of superiority and inferiority get in the way of unity. They impede notions of equality. They separate us from one from another. They can blind us to the other's humanity, the so-called right, for example, and the so-called left. I associate the theological concept of universalism with our seventh principle. It speaks to respect for the interconnected web of all existence of which we are a part. It states explicitly, we are part of an interconnected web of existence, meaning we are part of something bigger than our individual selves. The implication is what affects one affects us all. Now, I want to be explicit in juxtaposing our seventh and first principles. Our first principle that states a belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the individual. Since it doesn't state a belief in the equal worth and dignity of every person, it leaves open the possibility that a tall person has more inherent worth than a short one. That one with more money, more academic knowledge, has more inherent worth than one with less than either asset. I don't want to demean our first principle. It's a powerful statement. It's an important statement. In fact, it's largely what first attracted me to Unitarian Universalism. I thought then, and I think now, a community of faith that explicitly states a belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person would be of particular attraction to those whose identity has been and or remains marginalized. But if we look at the demographics of a typical UU congregation, either my presumption was and remains inaccurate, or our congregations would benefit from some internal perspective and self-looking. My lived experience of universalism or UUism is that there is a great deal of emphasis on the individual and much less attention paid to our interdependence with one another, our interdependence between our congregations, or even the larger community in which we live. When I've stepped back and attempted to analyze our overarching dynamics, my observations don't surprise me. They do disappoint me sometimes, but they don't surprise. You see, UUism grew up largely during the age of the Enlightenment. I think, therefore I am. It's a powerful and important construct, but it's a flawed one. It ushered in a separation of mind and body, a separation of body and the external. It grounds one's very existence in the thinking mind, a unique and separate mind. It implies one does not have nor requires a connection with the external. And if I think because I am, or I am because I think, is a foundational notion, it makes perfect sense one would both highly value and vigorously defend one's thoughts and one's beliefs. In fact, defend them as if our lives depended on it. Such does not bode well for a sense of community. It doesn't bode well for inclusion or acceptance. I want to hold up an alternative narrative, perhaps best framed by the phrase, I am because we are. The concept is captured in the African term Ubuntu. Nelson Mandela defined it as a profound sense that we're human only through the humanity of others. The primary reference point is the other, interconnectedness, not personal thought or belief. It recognizes our personal best interests are inextricably tied to the best interest of the other. Such an organizing principle imposes a sense of moral obligation regarding our responsibility to and for others. Ubuntu is a wonderful metaphor for universalism. As I close, I want to highlight that our seventh principle should be a gift Unitarian Universalism brings to the world, and we should be intentional in our sharing. Our world is in crisis as a result of this C-19 big virus. The experts tell us the primary tool we have to combat its powerful impact is to minimize the spread of that infection, that each of us must play a role to minimize the spread of the disease. If inherent worth and dignity of every person is one's primary reference point, we run a grave risk that each person will maximize their own worth and dignity, give preference to their own wants and needs, with potentially catastrophic consequences. What's needed is for each of us to recognize and to be driven by the notion, I am because we are. I am because we are. With this as a primary reference point, decisions will be made based on what's in the best interest of the whole, of the web, not what's in my own personal best interest. We will self-quarantine, not because we like it. We'll get those vaccination shots not because we want to, but because we are driven by a moral obligation to the good of the whole. So I ask, what better gift could we give to each other and to the world than to be driven by an obligation to the greater good? May it be so. Amen and Ashe.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing in my soul.
The Sunday offering is an expression of the generosity that makes our congregational life possible. As Buddhist teacher Joseph Goldstein has said, it is important to understand that generosity is a practice. It's not just a single event. It's a quality in our hearts and minds that we can develop and cultivate. Please text your donation to Chalice. If you haven't texted a donation before, know that once you text the amount, you'll get a reply with a link to follow to enter your credit card information. And if you've already done that once when you've donated, then you won't need to enter it again. If your Sunday donation is part of your pledge payment, please be sure to indicate the word pledge after the dollar amount. And also know that you can make a text donation anytime. It doesn't need to be just during this worship hour. So the phone number will be on screen in a moment, and I'll also put it in the chat box. Please give generously. Please join me in dedicating our offering with words of affirmation. As Unitarian Universalists, we aspire to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands.
Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. That morning, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. You may talk about your king of Gideon, you may talk about your man of Saul. There's none like good old Joshua at the battle of Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. Up to the walls of Jericho he marched with spear in hand. Go blow them red horns, Joshua cried, 'cause the battle is in my hand. Then the lamb sheep horn began to blow, trumpets began to sound. Joshua commanded the children to shout, and the walls came tumbling down. That morning, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. Didn't it rain, children? Didn't it rain, oh my Lord? Didn't it? Didn't it? Didn't it? Oh my Lord, didn't it rain? Didn't it rain, children? Didn't it rain, oh my Lord? Didn't it? Didn't it? Didn't it? Oh my Lord, didn't it rain? It rained 40 days and 40 nights without stopping. Noah was glad when the rain stopped dropping. When I get to heaven, gonna put on my shoes, gonna walk around heaven and tell the news. Just listen how it's raining all day, all night. Just listen how it's raining all day, all night. Didn't it rain, children? Didn't it rain, oh my Lord? Didn't it? Didn't it? Didn't it? Oh my Lord, didn't it rain? Didn't it rain, children? Didn't it rain, oh my Lord? Didn't it? Didn't it? Didn't it? Oh my Lord, didn't it rain? The Lord told Noah, take them 2 by 2, the ox and the fox and the kangaroo. The wicked man, if he don't repent, leave him there until judgment. Just listen how it's raining all day, all night. Just listen how it's raining all day, all night. Didn't it rain?
So before we close the service, I'd like to remind newcomers to use the link in the chat box to add your name to our email list. A quick note, our next Black preacher will preach on February 13th, the Reverend Dr. Natalie Fenimore. Dr. Fenimore has not given us permission to share the recording of her sermon on our YouTube channel. So if you want to hear her sermon, and you do, you will need to be on Zoom that Sunday morning. So again, that's February 13th. As we leave this time together, may we carry with us for contemplation some of the ideas from this hour. May we keep our hearts open to new ideas and new ways of thinking. May the light of curiosity and possibility burn bright in each of us, even as we extinguish the shared light of our gathering. Love and blessings to each of you. Blessed be. You're invited to close our time together by singing the well, and then please stay put. We have a quick announcement from Alice Dodd about our upcoming auction, something fun we can look forward to. And then after the announcement, everyone is invited to coffee hour.
Dodd here. The Chalice auction is a great way to benefit Chalice by offering an ability or talent that auction bidders may wish to buy. Here's a few examples of online auction items from last year. There was a wonderful online concert performed by Tim McKnight and Jennifer Savillon. Kathy Zapata and Alex Bergamini gave an online cooking demo, and Maureen Lighthall offered an online talk with slides of her abstract artwork and the artists that influenced her. Can you offer online help in flower arranging, jewelry making, or watercolor painting, for instance? Maybe an online lesson in how to make personalized greeting cards. And if you have the talent but lack the skill to video record, the auction team can work with you. Another idea, if you are computer savvy and willing to use something like a team viewer app, would you be willing to donate several hours of your time to remotely help the winning bidders learn some unfamiliar computer skills like how to edit and organize photos, for instance? Well, think about a skill or ability you have for which someone at Chalice may want to bid. Then go to charityauction.bid/ChaliceUU and list your item or experience. And if you have questions, please contact the auction team at chaliceauction@gmail.com or call Judy Wynn at 760-751-3543. And thanks for helping.